Good evening, everyone. This is Corinthia Benison, founder of Renaissance Center of Mastery. We are a mental health, behavioral health clinic dedicated to providing social justice and mental health services to youth of Harlem. So I'm here this evening with Victor Pate, who's on this platform. We're going to be discussing mass incarceration as it ties into mental health issues and concerns facing the community. And so I just want to formally introduce, where did he go? Okay, I think we're having some technical difficulties, everyone, so bear with me. I'll just speak a little bit about him since he's away. He is a human rights advocate. He has faced firsthand the inhumane treatment of solitary confinement in the prison system and has worked to influence policy in prison reform regarding long-term isolation and solitary confinement. So I definitely wanted to have him on this platform just to discuss mental health as it relates to violence in the community, the incarceration process, and discuss processes and solutions on how we could, better, manage the incarceration process and, solutions regarding mental health. That is a need for people incarcerated and not incarcerated. So I wanted him to weigh in and just give more in depth about his experiences and have a conversation. So hopefully he'll be back with us in a few minutes. I don't know.
Actually, in the interim, hey, everybody, this is William Hunnell. I'm trying to get my whole camera situation set up. Don't pay too much attention to me. I lurk in the backgrounds when it comes to things like this. I'm sorry, I'm just clicking buttons back here trying to get on the screen. Give me just a second. All right. Okay. Here we go. There we go.
Oh, here we go.
So I happened through because I was really interested in the conversation that you were having about mental health as it pertains to the incarcerated population, especially when it comes to release. Because that's one of the things that I have worked on for a lot of years myself. I used to be on the board of an organization called the Fraternal Order of Ex-Offenders. And so it's even in my legal practice, I worked with a lot of ex-offenders in things like they didn't really understand. Like in Maryland, if you get locked up, you can get your child support payments stayed during your term of incarceration. Mm-hmm. A lot of brothers and sisters who go in with child support obligations don't know that. And while they're incarcerated and not able to pay anything, those things just keep building up. And so once they get outside, this is a whole other financial stressor on, and depending on what their relationship is like with their significant, their child's other parent, that can now be this leverage to really push them into some behaviors that will lead them to recidivate.
Yeah. And so, when you say that, when you are facing release, there is a coordinator, well, not a coordinator, I don't know what the title of the person is, but someone, the resources that are provided to you. Mm-hmm. Is there therapy services and, as far as housing and stability and going, back into society and even job opportunities, it can be extremely challenging. And what we find is a lot of people re-enter the system because there is essentially not enough resources to help them, kind of go back into society and, start a life over. And then they have that stigma as well when it comes to gainful employment. And, a lot of times it's not enough. And so they revert back to criminal activity to sustain, to survive, essentially.
You're absolutely right, because let's not forget that, it's a secret that I've learned because I've interviewed half dozen people on this topic and done research and whatever. And I've come to this conclusion, and the data supports it. You ready?
Yeah.
These are people.
Right.
Ta-da. It's not magic. We require, it's so funny, think about this. We require a level of discipline for them that we don't require anyplace else. We require people who have been released for incarceration to be comfortable taking time and waiting patiently during the process and being okay taking stigma, to take all of the stuff that our society is heaping on them, and you need to be okay with it. Because remember that crime you committed whenever you committed it, whether you committed it or not,
right?
Which is a whole other thing.
Yeah. And I think too, even sometimes people who go in and you know, sometimes people's time served is very different. Some people
Yes.
have the support of family. Some people don't. You know, whether you get visitation, whether you don't. Those are all things I think mentally can weigh on a person's
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
served in the prison system. But you
Absolutely.
know, I think things have gotten a better in a way where you are able to get a degree in prison now. You know, you are able to learn some skills that can prepare you for the real world.
Yeah.
So you know, I've
The challenge isn't even what they're teaching them in prison. It's not even the skills development. It is what we do to them when they come back out.
yeah.
Because think about this. And we tend to think about these extreme examples, but let's use them. Three different sets. You have somebody who's been in for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? That means that they are probably laid off of whatever job they were on.
Yeah.
They probably if they had any type of obligations, any type of bills or whatever, those bills have been piling up. And think about this, how funny it is, because think about just like a Planet Fitness membership. You got a $29.99 per month every month. That's a bill coming out every month. Guess where you're not going? You in the yard. You ain't worried about Planet Fitness. But that's still, and it's those types of things, and these things negatively impact your credit. So 6 months of incarceration, you may have to spend 2 years trying to fix the stuff that happened.
Rebound from that. Yep.
And let's not forget, now you're back out. Who wants to hire you?
Yeah.
Because that's always the thing. And there are a lot of programs that won't allow you to live in certain public housing or get certain public benefits.
Yeah.
And so what do you when you leave people no other option?
Yeah.
And then require them to be okay with all of this.
Yeah. That's asking to, that's not realistic at all.
But you have a lot of these legislators and people who sit up there and say that all happy and proud, like, look at what we're doing. We're punishing them. Like, who is them? Yeah. And that's what happens when we get to other people. Mm-hmm. When we get to say, like, oh, those people, because they're criminals there, then now we can treat them. They lose their humanity. They become less than, and we can treat them. We are justified in anything we do to them because they're less than. I'll pay you under the table because ain't nobody gonna hire you anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
So when the stimulus money comes, you can't get none. Right.
Well, yeah, you don't have paperwork. You don't file. You don't pay taxes. You don't have a W-2. You're really, not in the. You're not counted. And so it's unfortunate that it is. The mass incarceration rates are extremely higher in Black and Hispanic communities. So we definitely have to talk about the socioeconomic tie to that with poverty and crime. And it's getting, very out of hand with just the increase in gun violence specifically.
Yeah.
And so, what are, I wanted to, I know Victor's not here, but in your opinion, like, what are the social contextual causes of extreme gun violence? When I think about, we watch a lot of TV, we see gang culture, and it's, when you hear the stories behind it, it's just kind of like, what mental illness or what is, this is recurring. And, it's just kind of like why a lot of these crimes are so.
Think about, but what you're asking assumes that people have been socialized to the culture that you think is appropriate.
Yeah.
We have a program in Baltimore called Ceasefire. And you know what? Let me give myself a shameless shout out and plug. You all make sure you hit up the BlackUSA.news morning show. I am the host, William Honolulu. Yay. And we talk a lot about a lot of these issues. And I really am grateful to you, Corinthia, for having a show where they can be a deep dive into it. And so in Baltimore, we have a program called Ceasefire. Baltimore Ceasefire. And what it is that it's a program that promotes peace. And it's just everybody we'll have a ceasefire weekend. And we just had one not too long, maybe 2 weeks ago. Just nobody kill anybody, nobody shoot. If everybody just, and I remember, and I tell this story often because I was one of those people when they first brought it, I was like, this is such a great publicity stunt. Oh my God, this is so cool. And again, I'm honest about it. I really thought it was a great kind of thing to do. It makes you, it's a feel good kind of thing. Everywhere, something we can do, ceasefire, yay. And that was like, okay, but like when I met the people who were doing it, I was like, oh, wait, and it was like they weren't, there were no photos being taken. I was like, this is really weird. And it was like these workshops in little bits of the community, just talking to people about how to be peaceful and whatever peace looks like for you. And it was like all of this stuff that didn't sound real photo-oppy. Like we're missing a lot of, and again, I gotta admit who I am, because I come from business. And so when I get brought into stuff is normally, how do we get this to spread? How do we get, so I came in with that kind of lens, and I'm like, oh, this is one of those do-gooder things. Okay, cool. Got it. This is feel good. Okay. And to watch them really, but over the month, I started going like, okay, yeah, no, that'd be really cool if that happened. And then the first hour, then 7 hours in, and I found myself actually watching the clock. Like somebody would post like 13 hours, nobody has been shot in Baltimore. And it's like, okay. And it's, I think it was like after 32 hours. I think that's the last time I remember that. And somebody got shot. And I'm gonna tell you when I really realized how powerful the movement was, when I felt bad. Not felt bad just because somebody got shot, because I didn't even realize I had gotten used to that. Yeah. I didn't realize how I got so used to it that anticipating nobody getting shot was something that I was hanging on to. And for me, it was that moment. It was like, oh damn, like we have been socialized, and again, I am what people would call mid-level, you know, what do you call it, mid-income, mid-social,
middle class.
Middle class. Thank you. I'm using all of those synonyms. That was crazy. Yeah. So I would be considered solidly middle class. So, you know, gun violence is not a normal part of my experience. The news about it is, but not gun violence. And so it didn't even occur to me how I had gotten so numb to it that to expect peace, I got let down. Like I didn't even realize it had been so long since I had expected peace. Right. I got conditioned to violence. Yeah. And in working with them, having them on the show or whatever, one of the, you know, I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things, and I'm mostly right about all of them. So I'll just put that out there. And so on the show, LNG, one of the members of Ceasefire, she was Darnell was talking. He was talking about how people give them backhanded compliments, like, how do y'all do that? Because I don't see y'all like. And I was like, next time somebody gives you a backhanded compliment, say fuck you. He's like, fuck you. I was like, it's a combination of fuck you and thank you. Yeah. And he said, what? I was like, to say that if you're going to give me a backhanded compliment, I'm gonna give you a backhanded response. Yeah. And LNG, she said, that's funny, but we're not going to use that. I'm like, okay. She said, because that statement in itself is an act of violence. And in that moment, again, that's why I really like working with this group, because they hit me with things like that. And it helps me understand more about who I am. Like in that moment, I didn't realize how I had been trained for violence, because I don't throw hands, but that very seldom has that needed to happen as an adult. Yeah. But so I don't think it's violent. But after she said that weekend, I just really had to reflect. When it's time to, when I'm putting together a strategic plan, we're talking about it, I talk about acts of war. I talk about, sometimes you got to break somebody's nose in marketing to send a message. And I was like, wow, I had been acculturated to such violence that had become such a part of me. Yeah. And again, I'm solidly middle class. Yeah. And I have a bunch of degrees and I have like titles and stuff, but at the humanness, and that humanness, if I can appreciate and hold myself accountable to that, then it makes it easier for me to understand the brothers and sisters that are actually incarcerated. Because if this is me, and I have an immense vocabulary, I'm one of the smartest people most people will meet. I only say I'm not the smartest because I don't know where your travels will take you. but so if I have these faculties, I have an amazing support system. Like when I tell you, my friends and family literally are godsend. I have all of this, and I still respond with that type of violence. What do we expect from somebody who has none of that? Or am I just? It could just be I'm totally left field, but.
No. I think obviously, we use the term a product of your environment. And even for myself, I was not in the streets, not raised in the streets. My mama was not having it. And I'm not a street person at all. And even the environments that I was in, I went to public school, I went to Catholic school, I went to boarding school in New Hampshire, and I went to college in Delaware. So I was definitely, not around a lot in the city. I felt like I was a frequent visitor, literally. Just summers and, my winter breaks and spring break, I'm in Harlem, I'm home. But most of my years from, 14 to 22, so to speak, 21, 22, I was away. And, I think, again, for me, violence, and even I think culturally too, I think, I've always had that toughness in me, just probably like my background in sports and even having a big brother, you got to be tough and stuff. And I had a few fights. I think, those are part of the normal development things, but I think definitely too, how we are exposed, definite levels of exposure to violence. If that's something that's practiced or you just see consistently, you can reflect that. And I think culturally too, we do have this toughness, and even in Harlem, you got to be tough. You don't let nobody walk over you. You don't let nobody disrespect you. And then we know what the fighting words are, right? Like, that's even
what you trying to do
growing up. Yeah, what you want. Right, and it could be I've seen a few fights though, and it's very petty. Some of the things, you said something to me wrong, you just coming out your mouth sideways, and then we're like, in those kind of things, you feel when you look at the dialogue, you're like, this could have really been de-escalated. But yeah, nonetheless, we have that cultural thing. This is a fighting words, and a lot of times too, we kind of have to consider like the effects of substance abuse with violence as well. And, a lot of times that could alter your mental state as well when you are on a substance regularly.
Wait, real quick, let's dig that, because again, this is the area of your expertise, the intersection of mental health and substance. But one of the things that I've always been curious about, because of some of the people I've worked with, and as they have gone through different phases of recovery and different phases of mental health, becoming more mental healthy, one of the things that they discovered is that a lot of this, it wasn't necessarily substance abuse, it was substance misuse, because they were actually trying to treat something. They smoked weed, or they, like, actually I know this one lady, like, they pulled one of her teeth, and like she ended up like taking narcotics regularly because of a random dental pain that just wouldn't go away. And so it wasn't, again, was she abusing it? I'm not a clinician, but it's like she was using it, what she could get to treat the pain. Like if they had given her some, if insurance had covered, or if they believed or whatever, she wouldn't have had to go out to, and I'm not, I hope I don't sound like I'm excusing. There's no excuse, I'm explaining the context.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times too, when you are talking about substance misuse, a lot of that does occur when people have injuries. Majority of people self-medicating stems from that. So when you're talking about like root causes of misuse, like everyone, has their probably a more in-depth, reason or a root of how it started, right? And so, talking about more youth violence versus, someone sustaining an injury and then, being prescribed something and then misusing it, it's still, misuse, and can have negative outcomes, whether you're not able to sustain employment, right? All those things kind of is a snowball effect, depending on the circumstance. But for just kind of talking about, violence, and substance abuse and all that ties into, incarceration, it's like what interventional measures can we make to, have less of these occurrences going on in the community. And it's not enough to, just talk about it. Or, I think policy reform is another piece in
Absolutely.
Having Victor on would have definitely gave more insight. He's being the expert. He actually really did the work as a person in solitary confinement and worked to change the laws surrounding that. But
interestingly, I might be able to add something in because not that I've written those laws, but I used to be I worked for the Maryland General Assembly for a few years, and the budget I was responsible for was the budget for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. So I had to be I had to do presentations to legislators explaining Fourth Amendment rights, the right to mental health treatment, and those types of treatments. And so again, with my advocacy work and in the community as well, I will not supposed to be able to speak from the lived experience, but I can at least speak to the policy and some of the implications and implementation issues on the ground. And you're absolutely right. It is again, these interventions need to take the individuals that you are dealing with into consideration at the policy level. It is not just cool to have people who are incarcerated, who have been incarcerated, who've been released to come and testify to inform you. You need to actually have them with pens in hand, writing what should be included in it, because otherwise, let me help those people. And it's one of those things that when they're at the table, they can say like, oh, hey, actually, this is a great one. There was this organization that thought that had done this, wanted to do this open house for people who were returning citizens and and nobody was coming whenever they did one. They thought that they really build themselves as this kind of place for people who are returning to come. Reason was that in the community, nobody wanted to be known as a returning citizen.
Wow.
So you want me to show up? Hello, everyone. I have been locked up. You might not have known that before, but now I am going to the place. And because they didn't have anybody at the table when they made this decision, had they had one person who had a lived experience, they could say like, I don't know if you in this neighborhood, nah, you might not want to have that because I'm trying to get hired here.
Yeah.
And and part of my reality is, not my reality, but in this example, the ex-offender's reality is that they know that when people have identified you as an ex-offender or a returning citizen, then now that stigma is associated.
Yeah.
And many of them can't get beyond it. Anytime anything's missing, they might not say anything, but it goes, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if we all just emptied our pockets, you're going to empty yours. And it's like, and part of the things that don't get taken into consideration with these programs is going through that hurts. To know that you're going to walk into a room and that people will look down on you as soon as you get there. That hurts. The courage necessary to walk in there is a whole thing. That's a whole vibe. Like to just be able to be like, you know what? I'm going to put myself in a position for a minimum wage job so that somebody who has no lived experience can tell me that I'm not worthy to make $11.50 an hour.
Yeah.
14 times a day or 14 times a week.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that and be okay with it. And by the way, don't get high. Don't smoke nothing. Right. Even weed. Don't take no extra. Don't do nothing. Don't drink either. And don't hang around your old support system because they are licensed. And if you get caught, your PO.
Yeah, your parole. Yeah, your terms for your parole, everything.
So, but still be okay and be okay doing this every day.
Yeah.
Oh, and whatever health conditions you might have. Don't.
Yeah, that's a whole lot. And look, whatever trauma you're coming out of prison that you've experienced, like you got to still even talk about the healing from the prison experience as well. If talking about solitary confinement, a lot of inhumane treatment, right? Whether you were, we can get raw with it, whether you were raped, whether you were jumped, whether you had to, and here's the other part. Whether you had to yeah.
Or you had to jump somebody.
You have to do to survive in there. Right. And so to have that still, something that you have to heal from, that you don't talk about, that you internalize, because sometimes too what you do in jail, you leave in jail, or that's what you try to do.
It's a trauma response. It's a
And
trauma.
it's a trauma
Not
response
just a trauma response. It's a survival instinct.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, one of the things that is I've seen happen, or at least on one occasion, is a woman found out that her significant other had been raped in prison and left him.
Wow.
I mean, that by itself, like, what do you do with that? Yeah. On so many different levels. Like you were raped. That was disclosed without your authorization. Like, all of these things. And don't forget, you got to be at that interview at 9:00 tomorrow morning to get that. This job pays $14.50, so make sure you're on time.
Yeah.
And it's snowing, so make sure you put on your galoshes and leave the house an extra hour early because it's going to be buses. Yeah. And then don't bring up your personal life at work. Don't nobody care about that. You are so lucky to have a job. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely a huge problem, and it's like, how do you hold employers accountable, right? A lot of them have certain programs, and like those jobs that are definitely entry level, appropriated to a certain percentage of people who are reentry or formerly incarcerated, and what type of employees are doing that and how many aren't, right? And it's like, what can we do? And like, you have to probably blow the whistle too. Like, some of these companies may be discriminating on applicants as well. A lot of here's the thing, depending. So make sure. I'm sorry. The discrimination piece is a big one. Make sure wherever you are, because I know you're in New York, I'm in Maryland, and we got people in LA or whatever watching. Make sure you check with the laws of your state, because some of them have made discrimination because of incarceration or the way they ask the questions illegal. So because that was a really great point about the discrimination piece, because a lot of times what happens is that a lot of brothers and sisters don't even know the rights they have. Some of them have gotten the right to restore to vote in some of their areas, and they don't even know that. So I'm saying, make sure, if nothing else, Corinthia is absolutely right. They may be actively discriminating against you, so find out what the laws are in your state. Sorry, I'm sorry, but that was I didn't want to miss that, because I want to make sure they're empowered, not just blaming people. Like, if they're discriminating against you, follow the law. Shit, the law got you locked up. Yeah, it's true. It's so true. And, just a lot of those resources that need to be accessible, because sometimes, depending on the length of time that you've done, you've missed. I mean, society is moving so fast. So fast. The way the job market is now, if you got locked up 20 years ago and you're coming out, it's like you've missed a lot. And, sometimes you really need like a therapist. You definitely need a counselor, a mental health therapist to help you matriculate back into society. And even sometimes too, just realizing that you're free. I think that could be a mental block for a lot of people. You've really been institutionalized. Yes. And, I think that is something that people definitely have to look at their behaviors, even when they come out, and how they're coping and what support system they have. And if you don't have support, you're really going on an uphill battle to really fight, not, going back in. And then sometimes too, some people give up. It's just like, look, I'd rather have 3 square meals and a shelter. We talk about homelessness. We talk about just survival. It's kind of like, at least I knew I was getting 3 square meals and a bed to sleep in every day. And sometimes too, that is the negative effects of a society not helping people re-enter the society. So it's like a whole lot. It's a whole lot to really like. It absolutely is. One of the big things that questions you asked earlier was about how do we hold employers accountable. So funny. When I was working in small business advocacy in Baltimore, I would go to these large institutions and tell them what they needed to do for small and minority and women-owned businesses and how they needed to be more patient and da-da-da. Until one of them hit me up in the meeting. He was like, okay, so tell us how you do it in your business or in the organization you work for. I was like, I mean, we're smaller and we don't have and I was like, oh, damn. And so when you talk about holding people accountable, my first thing is model the behavior. So making sure, like, I know for you, like you, because of your sensitivity and your understanding about mental health and the intersection of community, you have an open policy about people's background and stuff like that for employees and things. But if you are an advocate and you have not ever considered hiring somebody for a real job, not that I feel good because I got Tyrone a place in the mail room or on the janitorial, not that. But if you are not inviting people to your social or your civic or your religious events who have histories of incarceration, then you're part of the problem. Real talk. Mm-hmm. If you want to know what those companies can do, because I was so embarrassed and incredibly grateful for the man who asked me that question. Because I'm out here talking what y'all need to do, and I'm good at talking. And I had all my facts and PowerPoints and everything, and that question shut me. I've never been shut down like that before. Yeah. Never. I always got a background answer for something, but all I had was mealy mouth because he was absolutely right.
It's so hard.
I was so busy trying to make sure they were doing it, and you and y'all big companies and y'all history of repression and redlining, and it was a perfect stomping ground. But what does that Bible say? Talk about the splinter in your eye and don't pay attention to the log in mine.
Okay. Yeah. But I think the other side of it too is and it still doesn't justify. A lot of companies look at the liability, right? Depending on the crime, depending on a lot, it could just, I think they just dismiss.
The issue is that a lot of companies don't actually have a policy. That's the problem. It is whoever happens to be sitting in HR who thinks that this is a crime that is worthy or unworthy or like there's no, and that's part of the problem because we don't talk about it. Because in our workplaces, that might be one of the ways in this accountability, but we don't know what that is until we start doing it ourselves. So that's why, like, when I'm doing work around equity and stuff like that, I talk about what we've done or with the companies I've worked with and how we've expanded and how we've done outreach and how we've engaged people, because you're not going to catch me with that question again. Right. Because I can tell you, and it makes for such a more robust conversation. Because I can talk to these companies about like, oh yeah, this is the piece of paper that you need to, because I remember one time there was something that wasn't working at an organization and I tried to model it in one of the chambers of commerce. And I realized what it was. All they needed, because the way that it was working, people were sending emails and there wasn't a central formatting thing. And so it became a lot of work on the organization side. And so it became this back and forth. Well, we need you to, and the tension started. You know what I did? Created a Google form with a add-on that just sent off emails as soon as somebody entered it. All of a sudden, because we tried to do it and I was able to explain that process. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, you know what? That would work, and they were able to start working together more. And again, it wasn't a huge organization, but that type of thing. But it was only because I had the experience.
Wow.
It wasn't because I was reading a book about. So all this to say is that if you want to work, if you want to help returning citizens, actually help a returning citizen. Find one person. Start talking to that person, because that's the issue. If we talking about returning citizens, again, this is population. Those people we're trying to help.
Right.
But, Brother Ellsworth Johnson Bay, a really great friend and an exceptional advocate for reentry and ex-offender services. He has a totally different way of communicating. He does things differently. And if you don't understand who he is, then you may engage him like he's in a way that won't get you the same responses. And so again, understanding who he is, not understanding who they are. Because actually, watch this. If a guy or someone was interested in you, it's like, oh yeah, Corinthia, oh, she's a Black woman. You know how Black women are. All I gotta do is treat her like a regular, all that. all that on your face. But how many times are we trying to create program for returning citizens? That's the same thing as the Black woman. Like just treat them like returning, because returning citizens need. Oh, Black women like. Mm-hmm. What should I wear to? How should I talk to Corinthia? What Black women like it when you say this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they might be right about you or the women they know, and that might be an alignment. But do you see how fraught with problem it is if that's your entire motive?
Yeah.
Now, if I actually ask you, it's like, hey, Corinthia, what kind of cologne do you like? Mm-hmm. You might have something like I like the smell of Gouda. It's like, whoa, that's a cheese. But you know what? Whatever you're into, I slather it down like Mickey Mouse. But that's you.
Yeah.
But if it's just Black women, every Black woman loves this fragrance. Mm-hmm. And we need to make sure that if we are holding the people accountable, that we are actually bringing people to the tables to have the conversations. You want to make sure that companies get held accountable, have them have advisory groups of ex-offenders that review policy before it goes out. Not advisory, purely advisory. What's wrong with that? Before you put something in place for a group of people you say you want to help, why don't you ask them?
Yeah.
Or do you know so much better than what they need than they do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's like, who's doing that work, right? And how long does that take to implement and happen? And would that be another organizational idea to replicate throughout communities, specifically of color, that have the high mass incarceration rates? Because these people that are coming out, we're talking about what it costs, right, for someone to be in jail, what it's costing taxpayers dollars. And all those things are contributing to, the negative outcomes in the community. So while we're talking about the acts of violence costing the healthcare system, people, on the rates of homelessness, and even advocating for homeless people, it's been a huge struggle. A lot of communities don't want, homeless shelters around. Again, it's like a stigma with everything.
Yes.
And it's not,
not everything. Not everything. Middle-class white people, there is no stigma around that. Think about it. If a middle-class white family if you want to move anything white class,
a goal, right? To be white middle class is actually kind of a goal. Like, let's have a house. Let's, hand it down to
in a certain type of neighborhood.
Well, but that is like standard. That's like what people strive to,
right. But that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
You asked before about why some of these issues are so pervasive, because the white middle class is always the standard. And when you don't meet that standard, you could be dehumanized. That's why Donald Trump, for a lot of people, is giving God status, because he's above white middle class. That's why no matter how much a Black person makes, they're still going to be below white middle class. They're going to be able to be told to, hey, and what is it? This $70,000 check you want to cash out of your account, Donald Kugler, you have to go and have the police called. But that kind of thing is because the white middle class, and because our returning citizens, they fall below that. They get othered so badly. Everybody others them, because if I get them to get you to look at them, you're not looking at me. And so again, I'm back into, there are a lot of these wonderful programs on the ground and in these communities that are doing like literally life-saving work. And one of the things that at BlackUSA.news we're doing is that we're trying to help those types of organizations, help them develop and help them grow. And so we have workshops that we do. You know what? I'm gonna do this right now. We're gonna give away two free tickets to our grant writing workshop. 2 free tickets for our grant writing workshop. There should be a link in the description. Actually, just send an email to me. I'm gonna do this. Oh, you know what? You don't even gotta send an email to me. The first 2 people to go, whoever is the promo code is Donnie Glover, DONIGLOVER. Okay, I might write it down for you, but we're gonna. Oh wait, somebody's leaving comments. I'm sorry, I just got all. That Erica is one of the watches the morning show regularly, and she's trying to figure out why it's nighttime and I'm out here.
Oh, Oh, your help, you're on the air with me talking about mental health.
Yeah, that just
So,
trying to share some
hi,
stuff I know.
Erica.
That's all. But yeah, but that's one of the things. You have these organizations that are really doing great work in community, but they're not getting funded because
Right.
one, they're working with those people, and the only way that they calibrate the value of those people is how we keep them out. So if you're not keeping them out, them having better mental health or them being part of a more stable community, we don't care about that. It's just how much money does it cost.
Right.
And again, that's when we dehumanize people.
Yeah.
That's when you make them like, oh, those people. I guess we can help them. It's some extra money, but guess what? When things get tight, that's the first place they're gonna come to get their money back.
Yeah. Well, I think society definitely has to look, we have to look in the mirror and say, how do we treat our people of poverty? How do we treat people that are re-entering society? And we have to be better and provide better services. I think also we do look at people who do commit crimes, and we also say, depending on the crime, you deserve to be in jail. And sometimes we don't think about, it's like we kind of dismiss them. Maybe you don't deserve a second chance. Maybe what you did, is you'll just we don't want you here, right, for employers. And so I think even when you talk about sexual offenders, you're talking about violent crimes, you're more likely to be discriminated against versus maybe a
Actually,
marijuana offense or
no. That the interesting part is that across the board, the problem is that there is no more. There's no more or less. The issue is that across the board, it is the discrimination. It is when people see, one of the places that idea comes from is when you know more about incarcerated individuals and you understand the gradient and you understand the different things, you can understand why. But the reality is that the lady in HR, she got locked up. Your one of your addresses was a prison location. No, thank you. I mean,
the person in HR, right? Who's the bias? Who's actually making the pool of applicants, right? If that person is biased or discriminatory, and then you say that that organization has no policy regarding what their quota is or what they try to be, if they're trying to be diverse and have equity and inclusion, then you're right. That person has no shot.
Well, not just that, but sometimes is that sometimes the businesses are barely able to do business.
Yeah.
Like again, a lot of the clients I tend to work with are smaller companies. Yeah, like small businesses, less than 50 employees. But some of my mid-sized companies, they still are struggling. Like the HR person is one of the people that started the company with, and they took over HR to begin with, and just kept going to conferences, and now that's what they do. Right. And so some of it is a lot of this, and that's why again I come back to treating people as people. Right. Taking introducing them around, because again, if you bring me around, I'm not. When I don't know you, your title and your resume and your demographics are what I judge you on beforehand. Mm-hmm. But if you're a person, if people have seen you on the show, if people have talked to you, if people, Corinthia, that's her friend. All of a sudden, it's not just that guy. If people, if honestly, same thing happens when in any of the othernesses, when people are talking about Black people or Asian people. Actually, I don't know if I told you this story. I love telling this story, so I'm gonna tell this story. When I was in junior high school, because I'm old enough that there was a time that they were junior high schools and not middle schools. See, that's for my Maryland folk. See, you in New York, you have PS. Okay. Anyway, and so this kid came to school. And his name was Chu. He was Chinese, like straight Chinese. He spoke decent English, like easy to communicate, but didn't know a lot of words. Hell, we were in the middle school. I mean, junior high school is like 8th grade. And so, of course, we're in the 80s. So, of course, there's bullies everywhere and getting chased around school at the end of the day. We get chased into this hallway, dead end. And it's like, oh, God, we're going to get beat up. And Chu goes, and does something. They turn around like, oh, no, he knows karate. And they turn around, they run, and they leave us alone. I was like, oh, we are so lucky you knew karate. He was like, I don't know karate. And I was like, but that I will never forget because it's illustrative. Mm-hmm. No matter what you actually, and I guess this goes in the opposite direction for a lot of returning citizens. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter that they could have just easily whooped both our asses.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he looked like somebody,
right?
They like literally ran away from us.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing when it comes with just because what you have a criminal record, you were locked up, people run away. Right. And once they now granted, oh wow, this actually does work really well, but I'm not the hero. Once they did get to know us and realized Chew couldn't fight, we did get our asses whooped. So, but it
well,
works.
Let's talk on a better outcome for.
No, but the opposite, because remember we're on opposite side, but that actually works better for the returning citizen in this example. Because remember, initially they thought Chew could fight and he couldn't. For the returning citizen, they think he will still, or she will kill somebody at the job, and they won't.
Right, and then the other flip side of that story, if you want to continue to a positive solution for employees to not think about, is that person could be your hardest working employee. That person could be outperforming the person who you thought, would be better. So like that is the test right there. That is the, to be.
Oh, and don't be a douche if you do hire them. And what I mean by don't be a douche is don't treat them like you're doing them a favor. Like and honestly, real talk, if you are feeling like you're doing them a favor, and if you ever make it seem like that, you may not be in a good position to provide this type of support. You're not supportive. You are like everybody else, and I want to be clear about that, because you are still not treating them like a person. You're treating them like a stray you found. Like, oh, look at my kitty, look at, and just like that, if that cat bites you, all of a sudden to the ASPCA, and these are people.
Yeah, I think that is another part of like even training in the workforce, because what happens is too, and I've worked for different employees, and you kind of gossip, or you talk about, oh well, this person, and you find out they're were incarcerated, and it could be another stigma in the workplace that makes that person feel even more uncomfortable. So I think that we have to talk about culturally sensitivity training for that as well. Because sometimes too, that could be a trigger for someone who doesn't have access to mental health, who maybe, got an opportunity, wants to move forward, but here in this new, opportunity, they're still facing discrimination amongst peers, amongst their management or of the such. So I think definitely from a workplace perspective, you definitely have to do more cultural sensitivity training as well.
Yeah, for the
society. And you have to hold the person in HR accountable. I think too, it's not just checking a box and saying we have, we hired this percentage of reentry, formerly incarcerated people, but really do the research on it and see the people that you have brought on, what have they gone on to do? What have, are you continuing, providing opportunities?
I'm gonna have to give you some pushback on that.
You hire one person and that's it.
Because the issue is, some of the issue is, and the businesses will always come back and say, so who's going to pay for this? And depending on what size the business is, let's never ever pretend two things. One, that our communities look the way they are by design. This is not an accident. The outcomes we are experiencing are not because of what we've done. It is in spite of what we've done. We have literally, we created an entire hymnal, entire hymn about we shall overcome. Like, it became a whole thing, and we keep overcoming, and they keep moving the goal line. They keep taking like all of the things. So we putting the onus. This is a social issue. Putting the onus this isn't a company issue, because these are people, and that's what I'm saying. We get back down to the individual humanist, because as a small business owner, what it sounds like is you want me to basically redesign my business around ex-offenders or reentry. And that's not what we're asking, but they can't hear it because of their lived experience.
Now, could I ask you, are there certain industries that should be more inclined to do that than others?
I think that while the focus is on industry, I think, and this is my opinion and my absolute bias. Anybody that know me know what's about to be.
I think people would have a bias about what industries or what.
I think the best thing
should be more inclined to do that, right?
I think the best industry is the industry of entrepreneurship right now for returning citizens, primarily because it means that there's a lot of disclosure that, and again, I'm not talking about lying to people, but like a lot of personal disclosure that you don't necessarily have to do. That you can build a company and you become an employee of the company and you still go out and get the work. And again, that's why at BlackUSA.news, we do a lot of this type of support. And with my company, The Grinding Gang, helping these small businesses, especially people from disinvested communities, because even if you are building your business and your business is not able to support you by itself, the skills, if we put it together correctly, the skills that you're able to develop and the portfolio of experience you're able to develop can help you actually in your career. We can help find you opportunities to volunteer and network, and again, humanize that entire experience. Because the other part of this is, you would be surprised who is an ex-offender if you think about it. The great civic leaders who have DUIs, ex-offenders. We got in an argument. I mean, it wasn't really, it's just a lockup. Didn't get convicted. What's the big deal? What's the big difference? And so a lot of this is, and I say this all the time, there but for the grace of God go I. Because I can think of when I was young, there were at least 3 incidents that had another police officer found me or talked to me or whatever. My mouth at the time could have got a hold of my heart.
Oh, wow.
Straight.
Wow.
You don't have the right to do this. I am not doing. I have my constitutional. Oh, really? And again, thinking about it, like 7:30 on a fall night, little black boy, 14, 15, 16 years old, walking through telling police what you're not going to do in Prince George's County.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so again, they could have locked me up. And who knows what would have happened and then what chain of events that would have started just to teach me a lesson. But again, figuring out how they treated me like a human. Kid with a loud mouth, acting off, let's get him home, blah, blah. But that could have gone the other way. And for a lot of the brothers and sisters, I know it did.
Yeah.
And something that small developmentally could have just shifted the trajectory either way. And if we remember that these are people, then it makes it a lot easier to try to help people than those people.
Right. And just you talking about your experience as a young boy and even like your interaction with the police, right? We talked about community relations with police and educating and training police more. There's a lot of inhumane police brutality, and a lot of police are not held accountable to the extent that they should. So these are all things that really just speak to mental health, speak to the problems with, building better relationships with the community and the police. And we still have a ton of work to do with that.
It's never going to be over, especially because the police were started specifically for Black communities. There was a difference between the sheriffs who were constables and stuff like that. The modern police force were based off the slave catchers. Like the groups of organized slave catchers that were deputized in the South. That is what the modern police are designed around. And again, like I said, that what we are experiencing is not. We are trying to say the fact that these brothers and sisters are in jail is what's supposed to happen in the system. The system is set up for this to happen. And we blame the individual company, the individual person. It's not the individual. It is designed like this. And until we get the voices with power in rooms with pens, none of the rest. We are going to continue to try to save as many as we can, but the system will continue to make more, and they have way more resources. Yep. It is about coming in and holding people accountable. It is about holding our politicians accountable. It is not letting them lie to us and try to pretend that it's okay. It is asking questions like, why do we have so much money? Like literally, the biggest enemy we've been trying to stave off for the last half century is getting their asses whooped by a small place that's borrowing weapons from us. So what is all this military spending for? And why is it, what did it say? We have 7% of the world's population, but 25% of the incarcerated individuals on the planet?
Yeah.
because it makes too much money. Slavery was too beneficial to our system. And now instead of overseers, we call them correctional officers. I have some great friends who are correctional officers, but they are no more different than the overseers of before. They're just better. They're rules. We have good masters now. And there's so much money that it is an incredible transfer of wealth. Like I said, I used to work on the budgets for this. We were dropping hundreds of millions on medical care alone, and it was still subpar. And the thing is, not saying that they needed better medical care, but why did we have them incarcerated to begin with? Because it made people money. Right. Because no matter how much money they said they were losing, their share prices kept going up. Interesting.
Yeah, the privatization of jails. Right.
And so this is the thing. It's like all of this stuff. It is not, it is overwhelming. And each one of us comes at it with our own point. But making sure that as we are taking care of our own pieces, we recognize that we all got it. We can't go like some people go like with politics. Like if you're pro-life, you'll follow anything so long as it's pro-life. Or if you're pro-gun, you'll follow anybody who's pro-gun. We can't be like that with this policy. We need to make stuff that makes sense. Yeah,
I definitely agree. And so when you say stuff that makes sense, what is really practical?
Not practical. Because the people in charge define what practicality is by saying these are the resources. We need to start on what do we need to do, and we need to ask returning citizens what we need to do. It's like because we have taken as a society, we have taken their power and their freedom, and we've also taken their voice. And then as they are dehumanized, and all of the images of them in prison, these animals, they look like animals. They're always bulking up. They're always fighting and savage. They don't talk about the ones who are studying, the artists in there. No. That's not entertaining.
Yeah, you only get the riots and the.
And so we are orientated that these are animals. I mean, hell, you listen to some of these. What was it? What were we in the 90s? Super predators, I believe we were called. And so that was by Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, like dog.
That was with the drugs and the violence.
But you see what I'm saying? So this dehumanization is the problem. And we all need to recognize that if you're not bringing them to church with you or to the cookout or when there's a real job opening, sending it to people, then you're part of the problem. You're doing performance. You're doing like, look at me, I'm so wonderful. And that's mighty white of you. Very colonizing.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. We talked about a whole gamut here.
It's so funny. I was planning just to listen in on this to hear what Victor had to say, but then it's like, wait, I get to talk. I get to talk again.
We're probably gonna have to have him back next week, right? So we could expound on his perspective, what he's gone through, what he's actually done to implement policy. That's where the change really starts. When you are reforming, amending, changing things that are in place to keep us down. So I definitely want, I'm going to invite him back next week if he would come on and have the time to expound on this conversation. But, definitely thank you for weighing in. Thank you for everyone who listened in. And also want to hopefully have William Palmer, who's another guest as well. And maybe you could do a panel discussion. So I'm looking forward to, continuing this conversation surrounding mass incarceration, mental health, and talking about solutions and advocacy for these people who need a voice, who need resources, and for the community to help lift them up and re-enter society. So thank you all for listening this evening. I'm Corinthia Benison, founder of Renaissance Center of Mastery. William Hanablu, thank you for joining me. Please follow us on rcmxsocialjustice.com. Our Instagram is rcmxsocialjustice.com, and so is Facebook. And I will be back next week, same time, same place. Thank you all for listening, and you have a great night.
Bye.
All right.